We are back, and we are joined now by Hal Singer, professor in the economics department at the University of Utah, managing director at Econ One, and the executive director of the Utah Project, which is an institute studying antitrust and consumer protection. Hal, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me.
So, let's just start here because inflation is the refrain that you hear all the time when people in the media are talking about the economy. And of course, we've gone through this on the show before. There was naturally occurring inflation in the pandemic because our supply chains were disrupted. There were work stoppages, and prices did go up during the pandemic. But now, in specific sectors, like housing and groceries and meat, they've stayed up and profits have soared for these companies. The Harris platform seems to understand that, but the media doesn't cover that at all. If you could just do some myth busting here for us.
Yeah, thanks for that one. Yeah, I hope we can talk about price gouging. It seems like a very sensitive subject these days. In fact, The
Right.
Economist magazine said that if we even utter the words, we could undermine the faith and the
Can
and
we
proper
pull up
functioning
your
of the
tweet on this? I'm sorry to cut you
capitalist.
off immediately, but this
That's
was
okay.
incredible. You highlighted this. This was a sentence in The Economist, this part here. The claim of price gouging is simply not supported by the evidence, but it nonetheless erodes the faith in open markets that makes America prosperous. So, according to The Economist, talking about price gouging is wrong because capitalism, people may start to think critically about it. I don't know.
Who knew that they were such snowflakes, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we should tread delicately here because I don't want like the entire financial market to collapse around our conversation of price gouging.
Yeah.
But let's go for it anyway. Yeah, it almost was something that couldn't be discussed in the media. You know, the media has their favorite kind of neoliberal commentators. They go back to the same ones. I don't know if I should name any names on the show, but you know, these guys just can't bring themselves to even accept for a moment the possibility that the firms in charge of setting prices, you know, in consolidated industries with massive price setting power, could have any culpability in driving inflation. And the other thing that would kind of cause me to go mad, as you mentioned, you know, we did have this bout of burst of inflation that was endemic, kind of economy-wide. But afterwards, we only saw it kind of lingering in very specific sectors. And yet the Fed took this position like this is just any kind of old inflation. We should address it by throwing sand in the gears of the economy. It was pretty clear where it was coming from. It's like a fire in your house. You know, you identify where the fire is. You don't bulldoze the house. You go look and you find the room where the fire is. You know, you take it out. So we had it in just a few sectors. Housing accounted for a third, as you know, of the entire CPI. And we have this crazy mechanism that says we're gonna treat the cost of owned homes as if the imputed value is the rental thing. So rental drives everything in housing, you know. And now we learn, and we've known this for a while, that the rental markets in the United States have been subject to a massive, alleged, I should say, price fixing conspiracy, right? And so, you know, the idea that firms had no culpability in driving inflation is just nuts. And sadly, I think the only reason why economists can't say it, not all, but most, particularly those who kind of play in this industrial organization space and get quoted all the times, I worry that they are in a constant audition mode for corporate consulting gigs. And if you bite the hand that feeds you, you're not going to be able to sustain your customary lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean that does seem to be at play here, for sure. And you mentioned the digital price fixing done by RealPage. I guess that's a great place to start. Where I mean, a lot of these companies, I guess this RealPage is software. It's owned by a private equity firm, and there are estimates that in certain metro areas of the country, it's 70% of large apartment buildings are using this software called RealPage, where it's essentially a digital price fixing scheme by these companies where they come together, they put their information into software, and they basically artificially say like, hey, you know, we don't need to compete with each other. We can set the prices for rent here, and we'll all make a boatload of money, even though that's like basically artificially working together in an illegal way. So that's why the DOJ filed this antitrust lawsuit on Friday. This was a part of what Harris proposed, right? Cracking down on corporate landlords. This was in her platform that she rolled out. So For me, if this is continuity from the Biden administration with Jonathan Cantor and Lena Khan, that would be encouraging. But I guess, Hal, what's your take on this lawsuit, what it means for her platform if she were to win, and her agenda if she were to win in November?
Yeah, well, the lawsuit's huge, and you hit on a few of the aspects, but just let me tell you, coming from an antitrust perspective, what's really pernicious here, what's really dangerous, is the sharing of competitively sensitive information across what should be horizontal rivals, two different landlords competing with each other in theory in the same neighborhood. They're sharing with each other through this intermediary their vacancy rates, and then they're basically, the second thing that's offensive is they're turning over their pricing decision to a third party, which is suggesting to them, by how much they should go up in the rent. And you mentioned the 70% number. I don't think you'd need to get to 70% of a neighborhood or of a city before you can effectuate, a pricing conspiracy that touches everyone, right? That is, even the landlords who aren't using RealPage, they see all their rivals going up by 14, 15, some ungodly, percentage each year. Why not do it? Why not just follow that umbrella and go under this higher prices? And it leads to, massive price inflation across the board. And we've known this is going on. By the way, the DOJ was a bit late to the party. There's been private plaintiffs who have already filed against RealPage. This is no surprise. And what was amazing, I just go back to the mainstream, kind of the economists, the neoliberals. Paul Krugman, God bless him, was bending over backwards to come up with alternative theories as to why prices were exploding in rental markets. And his theory, his pet theory, and he wrote at least 5 times stories about this, that the pandemic caused the demand for more space to go up because we were no longer working in buildings downtown, right? We're working out of our homes, so we needed bigger homes. And that's what was driving the price inflation.
He was, like, there were a lot of people in the economy who don't have that luxury, like people who make wages, as opposed to Krugman, who could maybe do it from his vacation home or something like that. I mean, so much of this working from home stuff, like analysis of the economy, that also feels like to benefit corporate landlords who want people to return to the office space that they rented already.
And my second favorite theory, just to pick on the New York Times, so I love them so dearly, but after Paul Krugman's, more demand to accommodate COVID, they ran with an editorial anyways, an op-ed on the elevator union. And if it was basically the elevator unions to blame, they were intransigent. They were digging in their heels for higher wages, and that was what was causing, inflation to spiral out in rental. It's been a lot. It's been a lot to take, but I go on walks and stuff just to cool down. I'm waiting for them to come to the light and see, what really was driving it. I'm not sure that they're there yet. Hopefully, they're following this lawsuit, though.
Well, what do you think? I mean, from a political perspective, the Democrats are gleaning from this because, I mean, the interest rates. I mean, it's finally been announced that they're going to. It had been anticipated, but in September they're finally going to cut rates at the Fed. But what's fascinating to see is how some, Biden administration, to their credit, and Harris continuing with this, doesn't seem to be taking the bite on this, like, hysteria in the media, or not taking the bite, taking the bait on this hysteria in the media, because, like, it doesn't really, if they don't crack down on them, they're just going to blame inflation and say that the Democrats can't manage the economy, right? And it's going to harm them regardless. So it's almost like they have to be more aggressive, and perhaps they've learned something in this regard, because then, it's already baked into the cake that the Republicans tend to pull better on managing the economy than the Democrats do. So then when they get in power and corporations take advantage of them, then there's inflation in these certain sectors, and then they get hit on it politically. So it's like they're cornered into acting to at least a certain degree. And you have to credit, of course, Lena Khan and how, Warren and stuff got Biden to put her in charge of the FTC. But that's one thing that I'm encouraged by in all of this.
Oh, when I say the Democratic Party was controlled by neoliberal economic thought for decades. I think that coming out of probably the 70s and 80s and the Carter experience. But, the idea was that they would move towards the Republicans and basically take a kind of corporatist view of the world. And there's been a real sea change, just in the last few years to actually think maybe it's the right economics, but it's also the right politics. I think this polls very well, to go out and say, look, we are going to point the finger at where, at who's causing the pain. We're not going to keep giving corporations, letting them off the hook. We know where it's coming from, and we're gonna name them. So I'm encouraged by the Harris proposals. I kind of wish that Biden would have taken a stronger tack while he was in the office. I felt that he was fairly accommodating to the folks who were responsible for inflating prices. He would, talk about shrinkflation, but I felt he refused to name names. There's a historical analogy. I just want to point out that Kennedy, when he was president, went after the steel companies. He named the industry, and he actually got them to roll back a series of major price increases by basically shaming him, using the bully pulpit. And I never saw Biden do that. It was kind of unfortunate to kind of watch it happen, watch what happened to his presidency as a result.
Right. I mean, he has difficulties using the bully pulpit. That's one of the problems, really, is he's not able to articulate some of the things that we wish. And I think it's reflected in seeing Harris surge ahead by repeating a lot of the same, I guess, ideas, right, in terms of ideological consistency as it related to things like antitrust in the economy that Biden implemented. But, in terms of housing, right, what do you take I'm less enthusiastic by about the focus on the middle class. I understand the politics behind it, but the focus on the middle class, home ownership, subsidizing home ownership, as opposed to, say, like running on things like we can repeal the Faircloth Amendment so we can build a public housing throughout the country as a way to combat the privatization of housing in this country. But I do like tackling it from two angles, right? Going after the digital price fixing by these companies on rent, while also constructing new homes and providing some sort of assistance for first-time home buyers. But what are the pros and cons? Do you share my view on the mixed bag nature of that?
It is a bit of a mixed bag, and look, if we can't just talk about supply. That's the YIMBY's favorite tact, is basically, again, exonerate the landlords for any kind of culpability for rental inflation. So if we just build and we kind of leave the price fixing, which hopefully is going to be taken care of, but there's another problem that you didn't mention, which is consolidation. And so what are happening is these equity funds are going in and they're buying up large swaths of apartments in the same neighborhood. And so what the YIMBYs and the defenders of the landlords love to do is show stats of how small the holdings are of private equity, across the nation. But of course, they're not just randomly scattering their ownership across the nation. They're targeting very specific neighborhoods, across the United States. And when they come in, they go heavy and they take in big footprints within the neighborhood. That also gives them pricing power. So I want to make sure, I hope that folks in the Harris administration and the economic team are paying attention here. It's not just adding supply, which I like, right? But we also have to come to grips with this notion of we cannot allow a single entity to own, a substantial share of the rental properties in a neighborhood. That's just a recipe for higher prices. You want to get to monopoly prices? Let one person own them all, right? So I wish that they kind of spoke about that a little more often.
Right. I mean, and there is still, I've mentioned Lena Khan a few times already, there is still a question as to whether she will be kept on, even though there is, seemingly ideological consistency on this front. She has not made a statement either way on that issue. And there's a lot of people in the media that are trying to pressure her, specifically big money donors to that campaign, taking the fight to the press because they so desperately want Lena Khan out of there for obvious reasons.
I know Harris could end this whole talk if she just came out right now and said that Lena Khan was going to continue to run the FTC. I kind of wish she would.
Yeah.
But I feel like there was a moment there where we actually thought, I think it was Reid Hoffman, might be controlling the strings. But I feel like Harris has come out so strong on this antitrust and price gouging talking points that it would be just logically inconsistent now turn around and to accommodate kind of the old neoliberal wing of the party. I hope she does the right thing.
I agree. And campaign rhetoric is, yes, just campaign rhetoric, but it's also you lock yourself in for expectations with the voters, right? So this is what you're tying yourself to in terms of your promises to a degree. Although a lot of that depends on the Senate, but we don't need to get fully into the election here.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.